Welcome back to Learn English Easy. Today's phrase is, the cat is on the table. Can you say that? The cat is on the table.
I am absolutely not saying that.
Just kidding. We are looking at a completely transformed Middle East, from Gaza all the way to a post-Assad Syria.
It really is a transformed landscape. We're not talking about like theoretical peace plans anymore. We're looking at physical changes on the ground. I mean, concrete, earthworks, checkpoints. They're defining who owns what and, frankly, who survives for the next generation.
So the mission today is to unpack all of this. We've got sources from The Guardian, the Atlantic Council, the Belfer Center, a whole lot more. We're going to look at these new boundaries, some made of concrete, some made of, well, ethnicity, and ask, is this actually stability, or are we just setting the stage for the next explosion?
That is the core tension. It's in every single document we're looking at today.
Okay, so let's start with the visual that really stuck with me. It's from The Guardian. We've all seen maps of Gaza, but there's a new feature on them as of late 2025. They're calling it the yellow line. Now, usually lines on maps are just, political abstractions. Is this one different?
Oh, very different. This isn't a line drawn in a conference room in Geneva. The yellow line is a physical partition. It's a new reality on the ground. According to the reporting, it represents a new zone where Israel maintains full military operational control to the north and east of that line.
So it's more than just a line. We have a quote here from the Israeli military chief himself, Eyal Zamir. He was speaking to reservists recently, and he didn't use vague diplomatic language like buffer zone.
No, not at all.
He called it a new borderline and a forward defensive line. I mean, that feels like a really significant shift in terminology.
The language is absolutely crucial here. Look, when a politician calls something a temporary security measure, you can, roll your eyes. But when a military chief calls it a border, you have to pay attention to the military reality that backs that up.
Right.
Zamir stated it very clearly. He said, "We have operational control over extensive parts of the Gaza Strip, and we will remain on those defense lines." Remain is the key word there. It implies permanence. It implies that the boots on the ground aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
So let's just paint a picture for everyone listening. If I'm standing on the ground near this yellow line, what am I actually seeing? Is it just like a fence?
No, you're seeing a fortress. The reports are describing concrete outposts, bollards, those heavy posts that are designed to stop vehicles, and heavy fortifications. Satellite imagery is showing these markers placed hundreds of meters beyond what was originally on any of the ceasefire maps.
Wow.
So this isn't a line painted on a road, it's a lethal boundary. It includes sensors, surveillance towers, rapid response capabilities. It is designed to be completely impermeable.
And looking at the map provided in the source, this isn't some small slice of land. This grants Israel control over more than half of the territory.
Correct. And we have to look at which half. It's not just random land. It includes most of the agricultural land and, critically, the border crossing with Egypt. So you control the food production potential, and you control the exit points. That is strategic strangulation. If you control the calories going in and the people trying to get out, you effectively control the entire population without having to police every single street corner in the cities.
Which leaves the Palestinian population where, exactly? If half the land is now behind this yellow line, where do all the people go?
It leaves over 2 million people crowded into the coastal sand dunes. The Guardian piece used a comparison that is just hard to wrap your head around. They are packed into an area smaller than Washington, D.C.
Smaller than D.C.
Yeah. Imagine the entire population of Gaza squeezed into that tiny footprint with all the agricultural hinterland cut off behind this military yellow line. We are talking about density levels that make basic sanitation, housing, and just survival incredibly difficult.
And this is all happening against a backdrop of what's being called Trump's 20-point plan. We know the Trump administration has been pushing the ceasefire deal since late 2025, but when you read the plan versus reading these reports, there's a real disconnect.
It's a massive disconnect. I mean, it's almost like two parallel realities coexisting. On paper, the Trump plan calls for a progressive handover of territory to some kind of international security force. The ceasefire agreement itself explicitly says Israel will not occupy Gaza.
But then you have General Zamir.
On the ground saying we will remain. You simply can't reconcile those two statements.
It's the classic clash, then, between diplomatic text and just military facts on the ground. Which one usually wins?
Well, the tank usually beats the pen. And the U.S. military seems to be quietly acknowledging this. Documents seen by The Guardian suggest the U.S. is actually planning for a long-term partition. They're envisioning a green zone where reconstruction might happen under very strict control.
Red zone.
And a red zone, which is mostly this eastern sector that is just left indefinitely in ruins, a no-go area.
So the idea of reunification of Gaza being one whole place again, that's being described as aspirational?
Aspirational is diplomatic code for don't hold your breath. It means maybe in 20 years, if we're lucky. What we're seeing is the creation of a semi-permanent enclave, totally dependent on external aid, with its borders redrawn by military outposts. The yellow line effectively becomes the new border of Israel, pushing the actual line significantly deeper into what was Gaza.
It really sounds like a containment strategy, not a resolution.
Exactly. It's about managing a problem rather than solving it. And that theme redrawing borders, managing populations, and creating these zones is the perfect bridge to our next massive topic. We need to shift our focus north to Syria.
Yeah.
Because if Gaza is about concrete walls, Syria seems to be about building political walls and deepening sectarian lines.
And the situation in Syria is arguably even more complex because the entire political deck has just been completely reshuffled.
It's a total reset. It's a blank slate in a terrifying way.
Right. Let's set the scene for the listener who hasn't checked the news since maybe Christmas. Bashar al-Assad fell in December 2024. The dynasty is finally over. We are now in January 2026. And there's a new man in the presidential palace, Ahmed al-Shara,
Formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Jalani.
which is a pivot that would make a corporate marketing department blush. I mean, going from leading HTS, a group designated as a terrorist organization, to wearing a suit and meeting President Trump at the White House.
It is one of the most dramatic makeovers in modern political history. The Belfer Center report does a great job of laying this out. Shara is trying to present himself as a transitional president, a statesman who can unify the country. He's visiting Moscow. He's in Washington securing sanctions relief. He's doing everything a legitimate head of state does.
Shaking hands with people who just a couple years ago.
With people who 2 years ago had put a multi-million-dollar bounty on his head.
It's wild to think about. And on paper, his new government looks, well, it looks reasonable, doesn't it? There's a constitutional declaration. There's a cabinet with diverse names. You look at the list and you see a Greek Orthodox minister of social affairs, a Druze minister of agriculture. It sounds like he's checking all the right boxes for inclusivity. Why shouldn't we take that at face value?
Because in authoritarian transitions, you have to look at where the power actually sits, not just who sits at the cabinet table for the photo op. We have an excellent analysis here from the New Lines Institute that essentially just shatters that facade.
Okay.
They call it symbolic integration. It means you put minorities in visible but safe positions to take photos, but you keep the keys to the castle for yourself and your inner circle.
So break down the numbers for us. What does this symbolic integration actually look like mathematically?
Okay, so the cabinet has 23 ministers. 18 of them are Sunni. But that's not even the most important part. More importantly, you have to look at the sovereign portfolios.
And for the listener, sovereign portfolios essentially means the ministries with the guns and the money, correct?
Exactly. Defense, interior, foreign affairs, finance, the guys who could arrest you or bomb you.
Yep.
So the Minister of Defense, the Chief of Staff, the heads of all the intelligence services, they're all Sunni, and many are former high-level commanders from HTS or other allied rebel factions.
So the guys who are fighting Assad in the trenches are now running the entire security state.
Precisely. Under Assad, the Alawites held about 80% of those key security roles. Shara hasn't dismantled that sectarian system, he's just flipped it. We've gone from Alawite authoritarianism to Sunni authoritarianism. The structure of the police state remains, only the people holding the batons have changed.
And what about the technocratic ministers we mentioned before? The Greek Orthodox minister, the Druze minister, where do they fit in?
They hold what are called soft portfolios, social affairs, agriculture. They don't control troop movements, they don't control intelligence gathering, and they certainly don't control the budget for the security services. They have zero leverage.
So they have a title, but no real power.
None. If the Minister of Defense wants to move a tank division into a Druze village, the Minister of Agriculture can't stop him. They're essentially garnish on the plate. They're there for show.
That reality must be absolutely terrifying for the minority populations who survived the civil war. They've watched one sectarian regime fall, only to see another one rise in its place?
Terrifying is exactly the right word. We have survey data here from Atana, which is a Syrian research group. They asked people a very simple question. Do you feel safe?
And what were the results?
The split is incredibly telling. 78% of Sunnis said yes. They feel safer now that their guys are in charge. But for Alawites and Druze, 82% said they do not feel safe.
82%. Wow.
That is a massive trust gap. It suggests that for nearly a third of the population, the new government isn't seen as a liberator. It's viewed as a potential existential threat.
That's not just a gap, it's a chasm. It's a fracture. And that fear, I imagine, is driving some very specific political movements. We're seeing a push for federalism that Shara really does not like.
This is most visible with the Kurds in the northeast. We have a report from the new region about a historic conference in Qamishli. And what's interesting is the major Kurdish blocs, who usually bicker among themselves, the PYNK and the ENKS, they actually came together.
Nothing unites people like a common thread, I guess.
Exactly. They see the writing on the wall, they see a Sunni Islamist government consolidating power in Damascus, and they are saying, we need guarantees. Their demand is for a multi-ethnic, multi-religious federal Syria. They want to run their own affairs within the state because they do not trust the center.
They've had years of autonomy during the war.
Right, and they aren't willing to just hand the keys back to Damascus, especially not to Shara's government.
But Shara isn't having any of it.
No. His reaction was immediate, and it was hostile. He called federalism a threat to national unity. He's using the exact same nationalist rhetoric that Assad used, just with a different religious flavor. He views any kind of decentralization as a weakness, or worse, a prelude to secession.
It seems like he's trying to be the strongman before he's even fully consolidated control. And Shara isn't just facing political opposition inside the country. The New Arab is reporting that a German Kurdish group has now filed a war crimes complaint against him in Germany. How significant is that?
It's legally very significant. Germany has universal jurisdiction laws, which means they can prosecute crimes against humanity that were committed anywhere in the world. They're accusing him of complicity in genocide, and crucially, his past links to al-Qaeda.
You can't just erase that history.
No. Remember, before he was President Ahmed al-Shara, he was Jilani, a jihadist leader. You can put on a suit, but you can't erase the past. These legal challenges are going to haunt him internationally. It really complicates his efforts to be seen as a legitimate partner by Europe.
So you have the Kurds in the north demanding federalism and, fighting him in European courts. What about in the south? We mentioned the Druze earlier.
The situation in Soweto, which is the Druze heartland, is extremely volatile. Telangana Today reports on violent clashes there. But it's not just the government versus the people. It's more complex. You have local Bedouin clans clashing with the Druze communities.
And this is where that sectarian dynamic gets really ugly, right? Whose side is the new government on in these clashes?
The reports indicate that the government forces sided with the Bedouins against the Druze. And this, for the Druze, confirms their worst fears. That the new Sunni-dominated state views them as second-class citizens, or worse, as enemies. They see the state empowering these other groups to harass them.
And this is where it gets really interesting geopolitically, because when a minority group feels threatened by their own government, they start to look for external protectors. And who is stepping in?
Israel.
Israel.
Israel is playing a very, very strategic game here. They're positioning themselves as the protector of the Druze. They've conducted airstrikes against regime targets that were threatening Druze areas, but this completely splits the Druze community.
It's a deal with the devil, in a way.
It's a devil's bargain. Do you accept help from a country that technically occupies the Golan Heights? Some Druze leaders are saying, better the devil we know, while others are calling it absolute treason.
It's messy. But there is one group we need to talk about where the situation isn't just messy, it's an emergency. We need to slow down for a second and look at the Yazidis.
Yes, this is the most harrowing part of the stack today. We have a statement from the Free Yazidi Foundation dated just last week, January 11th, 2026. It is a desperate plea.
We all remember 2014, the genocide in Sinjar, ISIS. It was just horrific. And now the warning lights are flashing red again. What exactly is happening on the ground?
The report focuses on Aleppo and Afrin. There are about 1,200 Yazidi families displaced there, but here is the specific horror. 800 of those families were forcibly returned to Afrin, which is controlled by Islamist groups that are ostensibly part of this new Syrian state structure.
And the reports coming out of Afrin are chilling. I saw the phrase separation of men from women.
That phrase just chills the blood, because that is the exact precursor to the 2014 genocide. You separate the men to execute them, and you take the women and children for sexual slavery. We have confirmed civilian casualties named in the report, Ibrahim Khalil and Jacqueline Haskell. These aren't just statistics. These are people being hunted down because of their faith.
And the context here from the Atlantic Council is that this is happening 11 years after the original genocide. There are still 2,500 Yazidis missing from 2014. And now in 2026, it feels like history is repeating itself.
It is, because the ideology hasn't vanished. The government in Damascus might be wearing suits and visiting the White House, but the groups on the ground in places like Afrin still hold those extremist views. And the new government isn't protecting the Yazidis. In fact, by integrating these militias, they are empowering the persecutors. For a Yazidi family, the new Syria looks terrifyingly like the old ISIS.
Which brings us to the group that really defined terror for a decade. With the central government focused on consolidating power and all these minorities terrified, what is ISIS doing?
They're taking advantage of the vacuum. Levant 24 has a report on what they call ISIS recalibration.
Recalibration? That sounds so bureaucratic, but the numbers are scary. Attacks dropped in early 2025, but then spiked 38 attacks by May alone.
It's the vacuum effect. When the central state is weak or distracted, ISIS thrives. And they've shifted their tactics. They aren't trying to hold territory in the desert anymore. That's a losing game. They've moved to urban cells. They're embedding themselves in the chaos.
And the targets are very specific. They aren't just attacking soldiers anymore.
No, they're targeting Christians, Alawites, and important religious shrines like the Zainab. This is strategic. They want to ignite a sectarian war. If they can get the Alawites and Sunnis killing each other on a massive scale again, ISIS can step in and present itself as the defender of the Sunnis. It's a playbook we've seen before. It's chaos manufacturing.
And there's this concept of the ISIS card. The SDF, the Kurdish-led forces, are still holding a massive number of ISIS prisoners.
Yes, the Al-Hol camp. It holds 10,000 fighters and 50,000 of their family members. It is a ticking time bomb, and the SDF uses it as leverage. If you attack us, we can't guarantee these prisons stay secure.
It's blackmail.
It's a geopolitical game of blackmail, with 60,000 of the world's most dangerous individuals as the chips. If that prison breaks, we are right back to square one.
God. So we have internal fragmentation, sectarian violence, and a terror resurgence. But we also have external powers actively drawing new lines. We talked about the yellow line in Gaza. Is something similar happening in Syria?
Absolutely. Israel is not just watching from the sidelines. They're actively carving out a buffer zone. Telangana Today reports on Israeli troops raiding Beit Jin, which is inside Syria.
So this isn't just an airstrike and then they leave. They are actually setting up checkpoints on the ground.
Checkpoints, military installations, and even landing pads on Mount Hermon. They are expanding into the UN buffer zone and pushing beyond it. They are creating physical, permanent infrastructure inside Syrian territory.
And we found a leaked proposal from the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies. It's a map, and it looks a lot like the Gaza map. It's all color-coded zones.
This map is basically the blueprint for a partition south of Syria. Let's break down the colors because it's pretty stark. You have the yellow zone, that's de facto occupied by Israel, hosting intelligence bases.
Okay, then a blue zone.
That's a deepened disengagement strip, an expanded buffer. Then an orange zone, which is demilitarized, no heavy weapons allowed for the Syrian army. And finally, a green zone, which is a no-fly zone extending all the way to southern Damascus.
A no-fly zone to the suburbs of the capital. I mean, that's effectively stripping Syria of sovereignty over its entire southern region.
It is. It's the Camp David model like the Sinai Peninsula, but applied to a hostile Syria without a peace treaty. Israel is trying to replicate the security conditions of a peace treaty, but just by force. They're essentially saying, we don't need your signature, we have tanks, and this is the new reality.
And Shura, the new president in Damascus, he's stuck right in the middle of this.
He is. He needs U.S. support. He desperately needs the sanctions to stay off so he can rebuild. The U.S. is mediating this deal, but if he signs a piece of paper that gives Israel control over southern Syria, he will be branded a traitor at home. The Islamists will turn on him. The nationalists will turn on him. It's a complete catch-22.
So let's try to pull all of this together. We started with the yellow line in Gaza. We've looked at the technocratic facade in Damascus. We've now seen the orange zones and green zones in southern Syria. What is the common thread running through all of this?
The thread is fragmentation disguised as stability.
Unpack that for us. What does that mean?
Everyone, the U.S., Israel, Turkey, all the major players, is talking about stabilizing the region. But look at how they're doing it. In Gaza, stability means a permanent partition with a military line. In Syria, stability means Sunni dominance in the center, a Kurdish federation maybe in the north, and Israeli-controlled security zones in the south.
So it's not a unified region at all. It's just a collection of enclaves.
Exactly. We are witnessing the end of the post-World War I borders. We aren't seeing new nations officially declared, but we are seeing the de facto creation of ethnic and sectarian ghettos. Alawites on the coast, Druze in the south, Sunnis in the center, Kurds in the northeast, and between them. Walls. Buffer zones.
Yeah.
Yellow lines.
And the incredible risk here is that by excluding everyone, by locking the Alawites and the Kurds and the Druze out of real power in Damascus, you are just creating the fuel for the next fire.
You're creating the perfect conditions for the next insurgency.
Yeah.
If the Druze feel the state is their enemy, they will eventually fight the state. If the Alawites feel targeted, they will fight. And ISIS is just sitting there waiting to light the match.
It's a really sobering picture. You know, we started this episode joking about maps, but when you look at these maps, the Guardian map of Gaza, the ACRPS map of Syria, you realize these lines cut right through people's lives, their farms, their homes.
They do. And that's why this matters to the listener. Because we are watching the map of the Middle East being redrawn in real time. This isn't a history class. This is current events.
So here's the thought we want to leave you with today. We are seeing a lot of these solutions being proposed: buffer zones, partitions, sectarian quotas.
But here's the provocation. If the solution for peace in the Middle East is building walls, yellow lines, and buffer zones between every single community, have we actually solved the conflict? Or have we just institutionalized it for the next century?
Have we just poured concrete around the hatred to keep it in place? That is a heavy thought to end on. I want to thank you for walking us through this incredibly dense stack of reports.
Always a pleasure, even when the topic is this grim.
And to you, the listener, please check the show notes. We've linked the maps, the yellow line, the blue and orange zones. You really need to see them to understand the scale of what we're talking about. Thanks for diving deep with us. Stay curious.